All right. This is Jim Carty with the Patch in Old Lyme, Connecticut, and I'm here with Joanna Connor, slide guitarist extraordinaire. How you doing, Joanna?
I'm good, trying to stay warm in the Arctic freeze.
I see the hat. I see the hat. That's a
Yeah,
good idea.
yes.
No, I've gone to Buddy Guy's in January for his January club run, and it is cold, man.
Yes.
It was
Yeah,
like,
Lake Michigan around.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, I want to jump right in here because I know you have lessons that you're doing today. Um, you have a new record coming out. It's 4801 South Indiana Ave, which was the club Teresa's address. Tell me how that came about as the title.
Well, once we were pretty much done with the record, we were in the studio and I could still see Joe at the console and he's like, wow, we made ourselves a great Chicago blues record. And I was like, yeah, people are going to be surprised. They probably thought we put out like a real blues rock album, between
Right,
me and him.
right.
And so he's like, what are some of the clubs, the famous clubs? And we started, he knows them. He's like, what are the addresses? And so the first one I looked up was Teresa's and it popped up and he's like, yeah, let's put that. I want to put that as the title, the address. I'm like, yeah, it makes sense because it really, I think what we brought to the table was that whole vibe and that whole tradition of like, it was an urban juke joint pretty much. And,
Yeah.
and I think how the music that we presented sounded. So it made sense to me too.
Now that club really kind of was the home of Hound Dog Taylor, if I recall, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he had that frenetic slide. And I heard that Joe had you play almost exclusively slide guitar on this
Mm-hmm.
project, which you're a mad slide guitarist, but um, you don't play exclusively slide in general when you go to a Joanna Connor show or your other
No.
recording. So what was that like to have that pushed upon you almost?
Yeah.
Immediately day one, he must have said that because that was his concept, or maybe even to take that back a little more. How did you prepare to make this record? I think song choice and going in prior to, did you know that that was his concept of you playing all slide and just tell me about that preparation.
Well, no, I didn't know I was going to play all slide. I mean, the main thing was I was kind of going in with like blind faith. And he said to me, listen, I want you to trust me. I have a vision for what I want to do with this record, how I want to, bring you out in the world. He calls it capturing the lightning in the bottle,
Yeah,
like what you can do. Like when he watched the video, like 2 or 3 minutes, where I was just like on fire. He wants that through the whole record.
yeah,
And as he and Josh Smith basically, I mean, he had sent me some ideas of like music and but when we got to I landed, went to his house in Nashville, and Josh and I went there, and the two of them kind of started bringing up artists and songs, and that, of course, it was with my approval. And so we pretty much chose the material like a day before we went in the studio. I mean, I don't know if Joe had been thinking about it, but
yeah. So he
there was
didn't
some
have a long list, and then you guys whittled it down, or
kind of, yeah, there
oh
was
yeah,
about four we didn't that he proposed that we didn't do, and all interesting choices. And then when we got to the studio, I mean, we focused more at his house on like what key I would sing in, because he'd test me, he'd play guitar and say sing, and generally he'd push it up, out of my comfort zone. On purpose, I found out later. And but I didn't know about the slide, but he would say to me in the studio, yeah, play slide. So I was
yeah.
like, I told him from the get-go, I said, whatever you feel that I need to do, I will do it. I've made my own records. I produce my own records.
Right.
So it's not like I'm starting out my career going, no, I have to say what I have to say, because I've said what I've had to say. So I said, whatever you want to do, I'm there.
And
So
and
that's how it
what from what I saw, both Josh and Joe played on almost every track or every track,
played on every track. Yeah.
and they're amazing guitarists. So
Yeah.
really, to have those guys contribute the non-slide guitar while you were kind of out front, and it seemed as though both your vocals and your slide guitar were kind of higher in the mix to some degree, so that you were really featured, which was kind of
Yes.
nice. I immediately noticed that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Me too. Because
Yeah,
in the past, sometimes I'll even listen to my older records going, the guitar should have been a little bit up. It was more in the mix. So yeah, he did. He said, you're gonna walk in, you're the queen, you don't have to play rhythm, because I'm used to doing everything. I mean, there's some songs where I'm kind of playing rhythm and lead, but I mean, what do I need to do with two guys like that? So he's like, I want you front, you're like BB King. I was like, okay, Joe.
Well, you know, you
I'm
spend a lifetime trying to be an ensemble player. You know, you started
yes.
out as a rhythm player when you were living in Worcester and working with the Pinot Band. But,
Mhm.
you know, when you got to Chicago, you challenged yourself to become a lead guitarist. And,
Mhm.
you know, these people who are very, very successful, that's what they do. They put themselves out there.
Mhm.
Sometimes you hear that they're a little higher in the mix, they're a little loud, and
Mhm.
maybe they're a little, you know, live, they may be even obnoxiously loud, but they're the center of attention, right? I mean,
True. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
you know, but I didn't think you were obnoxiously, you know, high in the mix. I think it was just that you were really being featured, and I think that that
Mhm.
is a good strategy. And I think Joe is a very savvy businessman and a very savvy
Mhm.
strategist in everything that he and his partner Roy do. Don't you think?
I would say so.
Uh,
Yes. That's why I to him in the beginning. I'm like, well, I think I can trust you on many levels. Musically, he's incredible.
yeah.
And business wise, obviously, he's also equally as incredible. So I was along for the ride. I mean, I'm not gonna, I was learning. I'm still learning, seeing
Yeah.
how their whole production company works. I work with Blind Pig, Roof with MC, good labels, but nothing like this. They have a literal, like a real company behind everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah.
So you mentioned the video, and I guess that's the elephant in the room between you and me, is that, you know, a lot of times when you come back east, back home, really, to play Boston and Worcester and those places, I throw you a gig at my house, and it's just kind of
Mhm.
a fun thing. And so one of those times, I, you know, as always, just ran the video recorder, and one of your tunes went viral, and right now it's at 8.5 million unique views after a couple
Yeah.
of years. And I just got word from Joe's people that that's what Joe saw to pique his interest in recording you. Tell me some of the other things that came to fruition for you from that video, because I think there are a few business opportunities that came up.
It really blows my mind. I mean, there was one at the North Atlantic Blues Festival,
Right,
that, but has not even compared. I mean, it did go around the world, and we don't even know with this video what other sites it's been on, and
right.
we have no clue. It
There's
could be
some
way
British
more.
guy, Phil from the Wings of Pegasus, that
Yeah,
analyze it, and I think he does a lovely job too,
he
actually.
did.
You know,
I really liked what he had to say. Very complimentary and
yeah,
really pretty cool.
yeah, he's
He
got
tore it.
50,000 hits on that right now, I think. But I think
Yeah,
all of his analyses are quite wonderful.
yeah.
So I
I watched
recommend
some.
him. Yeah,
He, he's intelligent and just a nice human. It seems.
yeah.
Well, one of the things, it just so surprised me because if you recall, the neighbor next door was still pissed off, and we just kept anyway. And you can hear me talking about it in the video,
Right.
but I
Finding the
had
residents to blow out his windows.
right. I
Yeah,
had never would imagine that would have done what it did. I mean, it wasn't any of our intention. We were just having fun. You filmed it, which is wonderful. And but one of the biggest opportunities besides the thing with Joe was last December. I got an email from a casting company talking about a movie, and they had seen that video and would I be interested? And they mentioned Adrian Lynn, and they said, well, he directed Flashdance and Fatal
oh
Attraction.
my goodness.
He hasn't made a movie in like 15 years. And would it be okay if we contacted you? And he actually himself contacted me and was speaking with me. He's a lovely British man. He's like, I was just looking at the internet at blues bands, and I looked at Joe Bonamassa, and then all of a sudden you popped up, and this lovely little backyard party, garden party, he called it.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, I said, we have to find her. I have to have her. So about a month later, we're in New Orleans, filming with Ben Affleck and his, I can't think of her name, Anna somebody, but it was like his girlfriend. They met at this
Wow.
movie, and we're filming a scene in the Garden District of New Orleans. It's a murder mystery, and
Hmm.
we're playing the song on top of a pool. They built a stage on top of the pool.
Uh,
And so we're playing during the scene where the lover of Ben Affleck's wife, quote unquote, gets murdered while we're playing. But
yeah.
that was, and it was supposed to be out already, but it is going to be theatrically released in August, supposedly. So they're waiting. They're not putting it out on, streaming or whatever.
Right.
And then I asked him, and when we were done, we did it for a couple days. And Adrian Lenny said, I hate to see you leave. And I'm like, well, I don't have to leave. And
And
he's
you can
like,
adopt me and put me on the payroll.
yeah. And he's like, well, if there's anything we can do for you. And I was like, well, I would love to be part of the red carpet thing when you guys, premiere the movie. Definitely. So we'll see. But just the fact that, and it's a long scene. It's like a good 7-8 minutes of us playing with my band. And we actually played live and they recorded it. And so there you go. I mean, it remains to be seen what will happen from that. But
Right. And you got a network TV episode too, where you were on screen, right?
yeah, well, I don't know what was from that. It could have been from The Exorcist on there. And then a lot of people, but just so many people have, and just random people have said to me, because I'm teaching now and I put a blurb on social media. I'm teaching it. Most of them will say, I didn't know who you were until I saw you playing in that backyard. So so thank you, Jim.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, just serendipitous,
Yeah.
So what else did I want to talk about here? Already talked about that. So vocally, actually, what I wanted to talk about on another interview, I remember hearing you say that Joe was actually able to sing to you in a manner in which he wanted you to sing. And it's funny because I've known Joe since he was in Bloodlines as a teenager, and he didn't used to sing, and he took great pains in learning to sing properly. And I think he probably still has a vocal coach. He actually is a little bit shy about his singing because he feels he's a little nasally the way his bone structure is. We've talked about it a number of times, and I think he's turned into a marvelous singer. And he's such a hard worker. As a child, he was a kid who behaved well, did his homework, and then he studied his guitar, practiced woodshed, like good little Italian kid, just in his room, just for hours, and that work ethic was instilled in him at a very young age. And I think that transferred to his vocal coach, really being a big impression on him. And he practices really hard. So if you want to tell me about maybe some of the things that he imparted to you about how he wanted the vocals on the record, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing I will say about Joe, and some people they don't like him. He's a poser. He's this. He has no soul. I'm like, man, I've never seen anyone work as hard as he does at his music and at everything else. He's a very humble guy, and he's extremely knowledgeable about blues. So all that stuff people say, you're gonna have haters in this life. So, but he I had worked with Jim Gaines on a couple of about 3 records, who was a great producer, Grammy winner, Santana, Stevie Ray, blah, blah, but not a musician, definitely not a singer. So it was really difficult with him producing vocals because he couldn't really tell me. He would try to tell me, well, can you try it this way, or this note is pitchy or whatever. But Joe, like I said, he could literally tell me, sing it this way, or he would tease me. He's like, if I can hit this note, Joanna, you can hit this note. And I'm like, oh, but he made me sing really, really strongly. Like, he's like, no, don't hold back. He goes, no, I don't want, this isn't, well, he bring up funny singers, this isn't Mariah Carey or whatever. So, just really go for it. So he would, and it was all his ideas, the long notes, the talking, the little ad libs. And, I mean, we definitely did a few more takes on the vocals and the guitar. I mean, the general tracks we did like 2 takes at the most. But even still, we were done with the vocals in 2 days. So,
Wow.
but he
Did
told
the
me, he goes,
song
yeah,
choice so short in advance. So you weren't even
yeah,
working on it in Chicago before you arrived.
no.
It's
I was
amazing.
Eric's out in the hotel room the night before we recorded, handwritten them, brought them in, and the lady typed them up for me. So I was like, I was sitting there like, well, here we go.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a thing, but I'm kind of like, that's kind of how I work to this day. I mean, maybe it's not a good thing. I'm kind of more of I'm not a planner so much. So I never play with a set list. I
Right.
kind of do things on top of my head. So it wasn't totally uncomfortable, but still, I never had really went in the studio making a record where it was like, let's just go. I've been like a guest musician on people's stuff, or like, here's, can you play this? Okay, cool. Never heard it before, but it was, yeah, it was unique. But he really pushed me, and he's like, I'm sorry I had to push you so hard. He goes, other singers I've worked with, they would be running in the lobby crying. And I'm like, and I came up, like I said before, I'm on the Chicago blues scene. There's no crying in the Chicago
Right.
blues
There's
scene.
no crying in the blues in Chicago.
Right.
Hey,
No crying.
I want to extrapolate something from what you just said. So, you used to tour the world heavily when you were younger. And
Mhm.
I think part of what some of the people who have already interviewed you on this project don't know that I may know is that you sacrificed traveling for your children and
Mhm.
to give them that stability of you being the hometown hero and working the
Mhm.
House of Blues and Kingston Mines almost exclusively, and then touring just very sparingly. Tell me
Mhm.
about that part of being a mom and supporting your kids, and by all means, be a braggart about your children if you feel like it. But you're
But
such a wonderful mom, and they're wonderful kids. So tell me about it.
well, it's funny. I was talking to my son today. He was like always telling me, thank you for being the best mom and all that. But when he was a baby, he was such a great baby. I was like, I'm never having another kid. He's too nice. This kid's perfect. He was both my kids. I was giving good material to begin with. So I
Yeah,
don't take,
yeah.
I just had to not do too many messed up things. I think they would have been okay, but they're like, no, it's you. But anyway, I would have even gotten off the road earlier because like my son, I dragged him all over the world, and my daughter when she's a baby. But they're like at the time in Chicago, I was too rock, I was too funk, I did original music, blah, blah, blah. So it was actually from a friend of mine in 2005. He's like, let's go to the mines and get a gig. I'm like, they don't want me. I would play Legends twice a year. He's like, just let's try. And I'm like, okay. And they hired me. I was shocked. So the
Right.
tide had turned enough where what I was doing was more acceptable. And so the timing was right. And I'll tell you, like I always laugh. Both my kids are athletes. My son played 3 sports and AAU. He literally had 2 weeks off a year. My
Mm.
daughter really got serious about basketball. She played 2 sports, but she was from 11 on. She was an AAU player, and so literally, I didn't sleep. I always tell people for like 3 decades because I was up every morning. Even if I had just went to bed at 4, I made their breakfast, took them to school, made their lunch. Try to make all the games I could make all the time. Even canceled some festivals sometimes. Like I
Yeah.
would tell people I'm sick, but like if my daughter was getting a special award, I'd be like,
The
yeah, I'm sick.
princess, as you call her, right?
Princess basketball.
Princess.
Yes. It's funny because when she was a little girl, she was like a dancer, a cheerleader. She
Uh-huh.
was always that
She's
very girly.
gorgeous. She's
And
gorgeous,
she,
by the way.
thank you.
And your
And
son
I
was so wonderful when I met him when I came out to the
thank,
Blues Fest last time. Just a genteel, beautiful soul, honestly.
thank, yeah, I agree. He's something. So he eventually got into music again. He was a drummer. He used to play drums with me as a kid. And if there was YouTube then, he would have went viral because he literally was like, I told a story. We were in Kansas City and went to I can't think of that place that's a barbecue place. Anyway, they had a Sunday
Gates
jam.
Barbecue is a big one. Gates
Yeah,
Barbecue, maybe?
what
No?
Gates have his name was Lindsay Shannon. That's who owned the club. I just can't think of the name of the club. But anyway, was a restaurant, but they had blues there. We took him there, and there's this guy named Little Hatch. He was like probably in his 70s. And my son got up to jam. He went to jam. He was 5.
Oh.
And Little Hatch would not let him sit down. He goes, that boy knows how to shuffle. And he, I'll never forget. I'm like, man, I mean, I wish I had videos of this. So
Right.
he literally sit on the lap of BJ, Brian Jones, when he was 1, because he couldn't reach the foot pedal, but he'd play up here, and he was 1 playing in time. So he was, but he got more interested in sports. So at 13, he stopped drumming, went into sports full time. And, you know, whatever they wanted to do, I didn't force music on them. My daughter plays 5 instruments, but she really followed the sports thing. But now my son came back, he went to college, studied economics, whatever, and he hated it. So he went to a Columbia College and studied audio engineering. And so he's a hip hop producer, and he recently moved to LA, and he's worked with about 40 artists, and he's making his headway. He's got a song on NBA 2021. He's got a song in a few big independent movies. He's done Tyler Perry shows. He's got 3 songs.
Wow.
So he's getting there. And so I'll just tell the story. And then, so he called me. He's like, yeah, Ma, I'm going to this guy's house. And I can't say who it is. He's a big time guy in music. He goes, because we're going to play basketball. And he goes, because he heard I can hoop, you know, because he beat everybody. And this dude, he was like so into the way he played. He's like, yeah, so I hear you're a hip hop producer. Play some of your music, because he respected his playing. So I'm like, you know, you didn't make it to the NBA, but look, basketball might take you right now. So yeah, so that's it. So they're both, and my daughter's doing her coach, trying to be a coach. She's in New Mexico. So they're both in the nice warm weather, but I'm very proud of them. And like I said, I didn't force music on them. Sometimes they're like, should I have forced it? But I introduced them to things. But I always told them one thing. I'm like, I don't care what it is. It could be acting, cheerleading, whatever, music. You have to do something besides just go to school, because I feel like you have to have a hobby. It doesn't have to be your life, but you have to have something that you devote time to. Because I felt like kids that just had nothing end up in trouble a lot of times.
My dad got me in semi-pro hockey for that same reason too, and he said, I just wanted to keep your behind busy so you stayed out of trouble.
Yep, that's why.
But and what I was getting at is, as a single mom who, has to manage her time with all these commitments and raising wonderful kids who are clearly succeeding, you have to be able to bang out your own personal things.
Yeah,
maybe is a lower priority, but do them quick and get them done, and
yeah.
And do it effectively so that you can make a living and support the family. And then it's just I admire you for that very much.
Thank you.
And it needs to be said.
Hey, I grew up in Worcester. We're tough.
That absolutely. Worcester. Although, they're genderfying it a little bit, and with the Paw Sox moving there, it's going to be the Woo Sox. You know that, right?
I've heard about it.
It's a big deal. They already have merchandise for the Woo Sox.
I love it.
I'll have to send you some.
I would love that. That would be awesome.
So the other thing I heard is that Joe had you play his rig, the rig that he envisioned you playing on the record. Tell me about the rig that he had you playing, and did you like it? Did you not like it? How do you feel about it? I mean, because you play your own gear all the time, and then someone said, "Oh, this is the rig I want you to play."
Yeah. Well, I knew that was part of
getting the right sound out of his rig. He's very particular. He is on the spectrum to some degree.
With that stuff, I would agree.
With the rig stuff, he is definitely, and the guitars and the gear, he is on the spectrum. And I love you, Joe, but you're on the spectrum with the gear.
I don't know how he remembers. I mean, I sat at a dinner with him and Josh Smith and a young guy that designs a guitar for Gibson.
Yeah.
And listening to the 3 of them talk, I mean, it's like, I'm making this up, but he's like, oh yeah, I picked up that Gibson and it was owned by a guy named Floyd and it had a bridge that was made in Memphis. I'm like, sitting like, oh my God, these guys.
He would fly to Moscow, for a crate of Russian vintage tubes, you know? I mean,
Well, it's funny because I did a show for a guy from Russia in Spain
yeah.
who's a billionaire and a guitar collector, and Joe knew him because Joe said, that guy, yeah, blah blah blah, and he named him. He goes, he buys guitars that I want all the time. We're like neck and neck buying guitars. So it was pretty funny.
But anyway,
Yeah,
tell me
well,
about the rig. Tell me all about the rig.
well, he, at his place in Nashville, he had a bunch of amps lined up,
Yeah.
mostly little amps, and he was like, play this, play this, play this. Okay, we're gonna take this one. It was end up being one amp. It was a 55, I believe, because I'm the complete opposite of Joe, a 55 Fender Deluxe, and just cranked. He like tweaked it, but it was just no pedals.
Mhm.
I set up pedals. He's like, nope, we're not using those. No, we're just gonna go straight to the amp. And so I was like, I was a little worried, but it sounded nasty enough for me. So it has to get a little nasty.
Oh, it
So
sounded great.
yeah, I listened to it now. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounded great. It really did. But I knew, the guy's like you said, that's his thing. So I was like, okay, if he wants me to play this guitar or this rig, I was kind of looking forward to it. I was even going to bring my own guitar. I was like, do I need to bring a guitar? He's like,
Not
yeah,
to
bring your
Joe's house. Not to Joe's house.
He has 10,000 of them. So yeah.
So that's good. And as long as you got a good product out of it, that's the
Mhm.
important thing. Speaking of which, let's talk about some of the tracks that you're like super, super happy with. Ones that are probably going to be pushed for radio that people
Mhm.
hear on like XM and things like that.
Well, I like the whole record. One thing I can say is there's not a bad track on it, and they're all pretty good, so nothing sounds the same, which we purposely did. But the three tracks we decided we were going to push was "I Feel So Good," which the first video,
Yeah.
which I absolutely love. I just think it's everything about it. I love. It's a party. It's a 3.5 minute party, and then we picked Destination because it's just a good rocker.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And picked Bad News, which is a really slow ballad, minor blues by Luther Allison, because I think we both felt like that is probably the strongest vocal and guitar playing on the record.
I always thought Luther Allison was one of the best songwriters I ever heard.
Great.
Yeah.
He was thing. Now that was a huge, huge loss in many ways.
I remember he was one of the guys I used to sneak into the clubs to see. You grew up doing that too, and he'd play a 2.5, 3 hour set, no break.
Yes.
And then he would step off stage while the band was still going, and he'd have a can of beer and a cigarette, and then get back on and then do the encore for another 45 minutes. And you were like, it was like Allman Brother length shows.
Yeah. Yes. And he did that all the way till the end of his. I was like, I can't keep up with this guy. So it was really a shock that he was like, he was probably sick for a long time and we didn't even know it,
Well, he had to give up the cancer sticks,
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately.
That does it every time.
Yeah. That's one bad habit I never got into. I tried.
Yeah.
I tried. I thought it looks cool as hell. I was like, ugh. And everybody in my family smoked. I was like, I can't. This is terrible. That's a good thing,
Yeah, it's a very good thing. You don't want that
Yeah.
So those are the three tracks. Is there anything in particular about anything else on the record that you want to talk about? I don't want to limit you necessarily.
I really like the last cut we did with just nothing like the rest of the record, which Joe almost didn't put on there because it's so different, was It's My Time. And there's several things I like about it. It's a really nice tune. Josh Smith brought it to the table, and then Joe had me kind of tweak the lyrics, but I love that. That's the one song Joe's playing on with me, and slide guitar. So I start off the solo heat and he comes in and I just like, what a great, so many bars of slide playing. And he says he's not a good slide player, but whatever. He's a very good slide. So I really love that track.
I like that track too. And initially I agree. Um, stylistically, it's far removed from the rest of the material,
Mm.
but thematically, I thought it was a great addition to the end because it is your time.
I hope so.
It
And
really
of
is
course,
your time. You know,
my dramatic, so it had to come during the freaking pandemic. But what I'm like, really?
I know
Okay.
it's awful. And just before the pandemic, you went on the last Joe Bonamassa cruise, and I want to hear about your adventure on that cruise because great personnel on that cruise. You got up there and jammed with. I mean, I think Christone is wonderful as a
Oh,
youngster, and you got Eric Gales, who is arguably considered the greatest guitarist in the world today by a lot of people. And Joe certainly lifts him up,
yeah.
in the and I think they lift each other up, honestly. I think they're
Mhm,
wonderful friends, and Eric's
mhm.
a wonderful guy. And um, so why don't you tell me about what it was like to be on the cruise, and uh, is there any scuttlebutt that you'll be on the first one when they're back in business?
I have no clue. I hope so. I put my pitch in. I'm like,
Yeah,
hey,
there you go.
um, I had never been on a cruise, and I like water and boats, but I usually get sick. So I was a little worried. I'm like, oh my gosh. So we
But it's a
took some,
floating city. You don't get sick on those, not much, unless
no, I
really
loved it.
it was great.
My family got sick though, because we did hit a storm the last night,
Did
and we
you?
couldn't do our last show because we couldn't even stand up. And
Oh,
they were throwing up, and I was laying in my bed by myself, just kind of like I fell asleep because it wasn't going up and down, it was going
right.
side to side. I was like, oh, this is not, but I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it. I mean, the music was incredible,
Yeah.
the food was incredible, the drinks were great. Um, just the people on the ship were nice. It was well run, and I had a bed with a window right over it. I could see the ocean, and that's all I could see for days. And that was like the best. And my cell phone wouldn't work, so it's like I was
Isn't it great to
absolutely.
unplug, Joanna?
It was. I had to.
It's a
I called
beautiful.
everybody up. My mom like, hey, I got no service, so love you guys. Talk to you in a few days. And
Peace.
that was so it was a beautiful experience, and really just being out in the middle of the ocean like that was
Yeah.
more than I ever imagined. And then of course the music was just, and then I got to jam with Paul Schaefer.
Oh yeah.
Um, I got to jam with Joe. I got to jam with Living Color. I mean, I got to play with Tommy Emmanuel. I mean,
Oh, I
you
forgot
know,
Tommy's a monster. You know,
oh gee,
who else I want to talk about is Reese Winans is on.
yeah,
That's what I totally skipped. I'm such a harebrain. Let's talk about the personnel that backed you,
yeah,
because some of these guys I knew and some of them I didn't. But Joe's living in Nashville now, and he still has a place in LA. But you recorded in Nashville, and a lot of these people recorded with the who's who of country talent, pop talent, jazz, rock.
yeah, yeah,
Nashville really is the music city for the industry. So
yeah,
the people that you may not necessarily know as stars out front, but they're backing everybody in the studios and sometimes in touring bands. That's who Joe paid up to be in your band. But I've been a Reese Winans fan, obviously, since Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble.
yeah.
My favorite keyboardist. I mean,
I
but
agree.
yeah. And then I saw Jimmy Hall on the list from Wet Willie and all
Yeah,
the Capricorn artists. I'm a mental case for the Allman Brothers. So I
yeah,
looked at all
love.
the Capricorn artists, and he was just on last night with the Allman Betts band. They did a live stream show.
Oh no,
And
he's awful. God,
tell me about Jimmy Hall working with him. He schooled the younger guys last night in the
I'll
last
bet he.
couple or two. Just his vocal quality was still there.
Yeah,
Marvelous harp playing, showmanship all day long.
yep. I mean, he laid the track down after I left, but I did get to be with him on the cruise and
Uh-huh.
jam with him. And I also was in Holland when he was with Jeff Beck. He came up to me really nice. I'm like, he acknowledging me and knows me. So
Right?
he is like super friendly, upbeat, um, just kind of a hippie dude in a way, a southern
Yeah.
hippie guy. But man, when you hear him sing, you're like, he's got the soul. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
chops, and he's so nice and down to earth. And he just loves playing. Like he wanted to sit in with me at like 11 in the morning on my acoustic set. And I didn't ask him because I'm like, I always feel like with big stars, you're like, I don't want to put him on the spot. And he's like,
Right. Yeah.
why didn't you jam? I'm like, I didn't think you'd want to. So, and he's there at 11 in the morning. What? I'm like, wow. Because I did an acoustic set on the ship. And yeah, and when I heard that he put him in there later, I was like, oh yeah. Because Joe and Josh had did some of the backing vocals, just Destination. And then when he put him on there, like kind of make it more like a duet, I was like, oh yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
But overall, it was a full band backing
Yeah.
in the studio, which
Mhm.
really is not the norm these days. When you
Mhm.
record, people take a tape and round and round she goes. Um,
Yeah.
but uh, tell me about how it was in the studio with a full band, and uh, I heard you only did a few takes per song. So
Mhm.
and you're the kind of person that Kingston Mines, you kick it off and is burning straight away. So I mean,
Yeah.
I assume that was your comfort zone doing it with a full band.
Yeah, it was. I think that's part of the reason Joe did it too. He knew where my strength was, and that is being in a club
Yeah,
and off of the band, going full throttle, and he wanted that sound too. He didn't want everything to be sterile and put in booths and isolation, and he
right.
wanted that energy and that feeling. And I think he was right. He's like a lot of, and I'm not going to cut down my fellow blues artists, but a lot of modern blues records for a long time are kind of lost that. And you can hear it. It's too clean, it's too generic, it's too smooth, it's too polished, and not that blues shouldn't be played well, because it should, but I think this brought to the listener that every musician on this record is a killer. And it sounds killer, but it's rough and it's raw and it's in your face. And like literally, he told, like I said, the first thing he said to all of us is like, if we don't get these songs in two takes, we're gonna either trash it or move on and come back, because that's gonna be. And nobody, he'd play the cut, we'd go, and literally never more than twice. And playing with Reese, I mean, I sat next to him in the studio. I was between Josh and Reese,
Oh,
and with Dream, because I was a big fan of his, and I was just like so honored and humbled. And it's funny because Joe said, you don't mind Reese, he can get grumpy in the studio or something. My keyboard player is grumpy, so I'm used to it. And he wasn't grumpy at all. He was and I think Joe might have been kidding, but he was just a sweetheart. And
yeah.
yeah, great. Everybody in the studio was a really humble person, and they all have done really big things and just incredible musicians with pedigree,
I,
you
I'm
know?
I'm reading the pedigree of all these people. Worked with Mick Jagger, Carrie Underwood, Delbert McClinton. I mean, it was just the lists were so long,
Yeah,
it was ridiculous. Uh,
yeah.
so I'm just so glad that you have a really wonderful product to put out there, and it's
Well, it's all
exciting
thanks
to watch.
to Joe.
What's that?
Thanks to Joe. But I mean, I
Yeah,
had I had to go up and do what I had to do, but I mean,
yeah,
this would have never ever happened without him.
yeah. I mean, well, he said he's a humble, wonderful, generous guy, and
Hmm.
I'm so glad you got to work with him.
Me
Uh,
too.
Anything on the horizon that we need to know about before we let you go back to your day?
No, just hopefully we'll be out there playing. We've got like 3 shows scheduled. Nothing past that, so we'll see. I think there will definitely be a couple more records with Joe in the future. We've kind of talked about it, but everything's kind of in. I mean, some people are gigging. Look, some people do actually have some gigs, but a lot of us are kind of like sitting there, kind of waiting to see. I mean, I think my band with Joe are going to do a live stream in April, but we're still hammering out the details. But believe me, as soon as I know, the world will know about it. So.
That's great. That's great. Last night, the Almond Bets at the Ryman looked like it was about
Mhm.
30% capacity. I wouldn't say it was 50, but I mean,
Yeah.
so there are some jurisdictions that are starting to allow crowds, and
Mhm.
I saw, I follow hockey, and some of the cities are now starting to allow some fans in some of the games.
Yeah,
Stuff.
yeah,
So it's encouraging as everybody's getting vaccinated, and God willing,
yeah,
we get back to normal by 2022.
yeah. That's what my kind of long-term thing is, kind of doing the most I can that's makes sense and is safe. And then
Yeah.
hopefully, I think things are back to normal. People are gonna just be so happy, and the musicians and the crowds. I think it's gonna be better than ever, you know?
Oh, I think so.
Mhm.
That's what they think it's going to be, like the Roaring Twenties. I
Yeah,
watch CNBC all the time. I'm home,
yeah,
trading my stocks, and they're like, yeah, the closest thing we can liken this to is, the stock market crash, and then there were the Roaring Twenties, and da da da. So we'll see, but I'm not wearing a flapper dress for you or anybody.
oh, come on.
All right, all right. Well, this is fun. It was great catching up with you. I know I kept you longer than I promised, but
That's right. I
I
figured, well,
miss
it's good
you.
we started, so I'm good.
Yeah, good, good. All right. Well, I will talk to you soon. And if there's anything I can do to get you gigs, you know where to find me.
I
And,
do.
you
Thank you,
know,
honey.
yeah, I'll
Talk
send
to you.
you everything soon. Yep.
Sounds
Okay,
great. Have
Joanna.
a
Bye.
good one. Bye.